subject of the talk, which I didn't choose, was chosen for me, has something to do with what?
Of the mind have experienced difficult times.
Does the nature of the mind experience difficult times? I don't know what that is in Hebrew, but in English it sounds funny. Okay. Well, the Buddha started his ministry with speaking about the nature of suffering, with the result that many people feel that Buddhism is very pessimistic because they talk a lot about suffering, they talk a lot about impermanence and death, and they talk a lot about the essencelessness, the egolessness of the individual. And so when you come across it, it sounds extremely, perhaps it sounds extremely pessimistic and gloomy. And so one might ask oneself, how is it that when you actually meet genuine Buddhists, at least, they're usually a very jolly lot. And the reason is, I think, partly because if you face up to the fact that existence is inherently unsatisfactory, when it is unsatisfactory, you're not surprised. And when it goes right, then you feel, you're lucky. But the important thing is that the Buddha didn't just say that there is suffering, that life is inherently unsatisfactory. He asked why. Why is it that normally the way we lead our lives, the way we experience our lives, is basically unsatisfactory? Unsatisfactory also means that everything would be okay if only. It's never quite there. It's just over the horizon that everything is going to come together and be great. But right this minute, there are problems. But then when we solve that problem, there's another problem. And then when we solve that problem, another dozen seem to creep around. And so we're endlessly dealing with problems. And we think that that's a problem. And if we could only understand that that's how things are, then we would relax. Do you understand? One time when I was in the cave, for which I'm so famous. But anyway, one time when I was living there, it was the first winter that I had spent there. And in the spring, it was still snowing. But it wasn't so cold, so the soil was no longer frozen, which meant that although it was snowing, everything was seeping through. So I was in my cave and it was dripping in all directions, which was a big surprise. I hadn't realized it would drip. Because during the winter it was all frozen, so it didn't drip. But now spring came, everything was dripping. I had a cold, I felt horrible, my back hurt. I was sitting in my little meditation box in the middle of all this with everything dripping all around me. And I thought, yuck. And I thought, now I understand why people said living in caves is not a good idea. But then suddenly it occurred to me in the middle of my misery that didn't the Buddha say something about that life is dukkha? That life is dis-ease. And when I thought that, yeah, right, the Buddha said, life is naturally, unsatisfactory. this huge weight which you're carrying on your back of always wanting things to be the way we want it to be, and to be, you know, satisfying and pleasant and nice, and we sort of feel almost guilty or resentful when things don't go the way we want them to be. We have a standard by which everything should you know, be measured. And if you take that away and you realize that it's okay for things not to be the way we want them to be, just to be the way they are in themselves, then there was this tremendous sense of like having a backpack full of stones dropping off me. And I felt fine. It was fine that it was leaking. It was fine that I didn't feel well. It was fine that things were not the way I wanted them to be. That was okay. Because the Buddha said also that the cause of our suffering is not something outside of ourselves. It's not, you know, difficulties in our homes, difficulties in the countryside, difficulties in the world. It's nothing to do with that. It's nothing to do with the fact that we get sick. It's nothing to do with the fact that we get old in itself. The problem is our mind, which clings to the idea that we should be happy and satisfied. Now, as soon as we stop clinging